You just press play on the Last Breath Huntcast, home of the Huntroversy. We're here to entertain, educate, and engage. And in case you didn't know, you only live once. But if you do it right, once is enough. Don't waste it.
Three, two, one, here we go. Welcome to episode 175 of the Last Breath Huntcast. My name is Garrett Bolkus, and thank you for tuning in. Sure appreciate you guys being here. Today is actually a listener request, and it turned into the listeners going to actually be doing the podcast with me. So Evan Rinke, who is the host of EVR Outdoors, EVR Outdoors, has reached out multiple times about some ideas for podcasting, and this one that he came up with is actually a good one, and I'm surprised that we haven't covered it yet, especially how much I really enjoy doing this. In fact, I built my entire edition almost exclusively for it, and that is processing deer. Not only how, I go through breaking that deer down and how he breaks a deer down, but also like what equipment we use, from things as simple as like our cutting tables to the knives to the expensive like processing equipment that we use, into how I make summer sausage. And then we go over some other recipes that are like some of our favorite venison recipes. I just think this is, I can't believe we haven't done one of these beforehand, just because it's something that I really pride myself in as an outdoorsman. After I harvest that deer, it never leaves my home. And even when it goes into making sausage and jerky and all the other nice things that people really enjoy, with venison, I've gotten to the point now where I have the ability to do that all right here as well. So we're going to talk about that. But before we do it, we got to pay the bills. So our title sponsorship is Badlands Gear. Absolutely love them. There's really no segue into Badlands and processing deer other than, man, it helps you get the deer into your house to process it. We're working on a new code for 2023. Bear with me. I will get those to you as soon as we get it figured out. But until then, I think our old code is still active. If you have any issues, shoot me a message. We'll make sure and we take care of you. Tompkins Taxidermy. If you shoot a big buck and you want to eat him and look at him at the same time, Tompkins Taxidermy is the place to go. Michael and Wayne are top-notch taxidermists and just really fantastic guys. I've got a hunt coming up with those guys. We're going to Texas in late March, and I think it's going to be quite a riot. I've heard a ton of stories about this trip, and I was lucky to get an invite to go this year, and I'm pretty excited for it. Next is Moultrie Mobile. We just have had a lot of good luck with their new edge cameras, new stuff, just weeks away from launching. I think you're going to be very excited about that equipment. Make sure you tune in. And lastly, we have a new one, Dark Night Outdoors. I did a podcast with Jamie Hoffman, the owner, a couple podcasts ago. If you haven't listened to that, I really would, especially if you're at all considering getting into the thermal game. But they've decided to support the podcast. Super good group of guys over there. Both Bill and Jamie kind of run the day-to-day in and out, and they're actually a very large thermal dealer, nestled right here in the Quad Cities. I did not know just how prolific they were until I got to know them a little better. So if you need anything from a thermal scanner to a thermal scope, battery packs, the tripods, they actually manufacture a lot of those in-house. And so those external battery packs like eyepieces, throw levers, tripods, ball heads, they actually control that, and they have a lot of proprietary little things that I didn't realize make your life as a night hunter a lot nicer. So Dark Night Outdoors, Dark Night, NIGHT. You can find them on Facebook. You can find their website. Give them a call. I think you'll be really impressed with the service that you get from them. But other than that, here we are, again, episode 175. We're covering deer processing. I'm going to get Evan on the phone, and we will start talking about how we chop up our deer.
Hey, G.
Hello, sir. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I can't complain. Thanks for taking some time to be on the Huntcast with me, man.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me on, the opportunity. I was trying to figure this out today. I've been following you guys for a long time. I couldn't exactly pin it down, but I think it was around the time got taken out is when I've been following you guys since. So super excited to chat, man.
Well, I appreciate you taking some time. And, you came up with this idea. I gave a short introduction of who you are and what we're going to be talking about earlier. But before we break into it, go ahead, introduce yourself, give them your 3-minute commercial, if you will.
Yeah, awesome. So my name's Evan Rinke. My outdoor account, if you will, is EVR Outdoors or EVR Outdoors on Instagram. I'm from Southeast Michigan, born and raised, and currently reside in Southeast Michigan. Went down to Ohio on a football scholarship for school. So that's how I have some Ohio ties, and I spend about 50% of my time hunting down in Ohio as well. Day to day, I work with an environmental engineering group at a large chemical manufacturing company, and I am a drone pilot as well for work. So pretty cool day to day. It allows me some flexibility to be outside and do what I love to do. So that's pretty much me. I got a little bit of a funny story about why I started my outdoor page. My grandma at a family get together actually gave me some crap about posting too many fish pictures. So I'm a big bass fisherman. So after that, about 2 years ago, I started up my page, and it's kind of just been a fun. I've always had a camera in my hand and enjoyed the whole media side of things. So it's been really fun, little experiment that we're on.
Yeah. So are you considered an environmental scientist, environmental engineer, chemical engineer? What's your what would you say your background or your title is?
Yeah. Yep. So my title is an environmental engineer. I don't have an environmental engineering degree. I got an environmental science degree and interned with the company up here with their environmental group. But the way they structure it and call us what we are, that's my title as an environmental engineer, even though I don't have an engineering degree per se. So day to day, I manage all of our site's wastewater and wastewater treatment is the day to day.
No, okay. That's just small world. I went to school. One of my majors was environmental science, and actually with an emphasis on ichthyology, which is study of freshwater ecosystems. So we probably had a lot of the similar classwork, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
I know that when I was in college, my favorite part about the environmental side of things was the labs, because a lot of those labs for me were outdoor based, and I just couldn't get enough of it. Get me out of the classroom and get me in a river or a creek or in a forest or sanctuary. That's where I wanted to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really nice too. It keeps me kind of split up. I've got days, where I'm stuck up here in the office and working in Excel and doing reports, but there's other days where I don't set foot inside all day. So it's a really, I love what I do, and it's a great balance, and it keeps me outside, and I get to interact with the Detroit River every day. So it's pretty cool.
Cool. All right. So I told the listeners we're talking about deer processing, and the ins and outs, essentially how we each process our own deer, and then, get into sausage making and jerky making, and then share some recipes with them. So, Evan, I mean, you're an avid hunter. You're an avid outdoorsman. Do you process all of your own deer? Do you take it somewhere? What's the process that you do when you got a deer down and you need to get it into the freezer?
Yeah. So first off, as you mentioned, this idea is definitely somewhat of a selfish one for me, because I'm always zooming in on your and Last Breath's posts and reels and trying to figure out what my next piece of equipment I'm going to buy, because your setup is awesome. So I'm looking forward to hearing you break down your setup as well. But yeah, I as of probably 4 or 5 years ago, I started taking every deer back home and doing it myself. We used to, my family's got a piece up in northern Michigan, and we used to basically just skin and quarter the deer and take them to a processor up there that would take quarters, and they would kind of finish the process for you for an unbelievable price. At the time, they've since stopped doing that, and that's kind of what pressed us into doing our own deer. So we also up there, we built, my uncle built a couple of years ago a walk-in cooler. So we've been experimenting with dry aging and doing some of that stuff the last couple of years, which has been interesting. But it was a really cool kind of system. I don't know if you've heard of a cool bot.
Yep. Yep. Go ahead, explain it.
Yeah. So basically for you guys, maybe if you're in a warmer area or, have early season deer that you need to keep cold, or, you're always scrambling to put ice in the carcass or get it to the processor as fast as you can and all that stuff. The cool bot is basically a little, I don't know what you'd call it, a little computer that you plug into a standard window unit, air conditioning unit. And it basically tricks that air conditioning unit to run at like 38 to 39 degrees, about the same temperature as your fridge would run. And it allows you to basically we framed in a corner of our pole barn, and then insulated that with some foam board insulation. And then you basically frame in the window unit, and you've built yourself a walk-in cooler with just an old window unit or a new window unit, and this cool bot, which is about $400 or $500, I believe.
Yeah, they're really economical, and I've really been conflicted on whether or not I could justify buying one. Typically our deer season, and same thing with a lot of yours, the hearts of it, if you will, are definitely cool enough to let a deer hang for a day or two, or sometimes even longer than that. My confliction is like, am I comfortable to give up, that's that much square footage, right? In my shed or in my garage or something like that. But you hit it on the head. Those cool bots are really handy, and they make it pretty doable for a regular guy to be able to make their own walk-in cooler. And then when it's, when you're not using it in the summer, you just turn it off, and it doesn't take up, all that energy that it would use to keep it cool whenever you're not using it.
Yeah, exactly. It does open up, a lot of people, that kind of the hot topic these days is dry aging, and letting a deer hang for, a couple weeks. And it kind of opens that up. If you're interested in trying that or wanting to try that, it gives you that that benefit as well, which is cool. I've been doing that the past couple of years. So, that's something we can get into, later on, I guess. But, we do all of our own, and that is typically, me, my dad, my brother. I have a couple buddies that'll run deer through the garage. And we've really, tried to just introduce people to it as well, that maybe haven't ever done it before, or are worried about turnaround times at a processor. Just, hey man, come, bring a case of deer and come over to the garage, and we'll get it chopped up and vac sealed. And it does open up you can do some different cuts too. You can do some stuff that maybe you would have to pay extra for, or not be able to get from a processor, because it's just too tedious for them with all the deer that they're trying to put through their shops.
I agree. And, similar to you, I originally started hunting. We took our deer to the processor, and it came to the point for me, when I was in college specifically, I was like, man, I'm a broke ass college kid. Like, I want to save my money for arrows or bullets or something else to keep hunting, not necessarily pay for it. And, I've been doing it for a long time. And just like what you said with your family, I'm blessed that my wife and we have a nice setup, and it's an open invitation for all my local buddies and hunters in the area. Hey, bring it over. And especially if they don't know how, I really enjoy teaching somebody how to do it. An example is, there was a guy that I met at the gym, really nice guy. He's a public land guy, moved here a couple of years ago. And he's like, just through process of being at the gym at the same time, he knew me from Last Breath. He walked up and introduced himself to me. And I was like, hey man, if you ever kill a deer and you want help, bring it right over. He's like, really, dude? He's like, that'd be awesome. He's like, it took me like 3 days last year to cut up my own deer. He's like, I quartered it and put it in my fridge. I don't really have a place to hang it up. And it's kind of, I guess it's something to remember, Evan, like what maybe me and you think is an easy task or takes for granted. Somebody, especially that's never done it, like, man, it's kind of like overwhelming at first. Like, oh, now what do I do with this deer? You know what I mean? Where me and you, we have the place to do it and we know how to do it. We kind of just gloss over it, So I think what we'll do is, if you'd like, I'll go down some of the equipment that I use, and then you bounce back what you use up in Michigan and what works for you. So what I'm going to start with is the hoist system. forever, I always used to do like the easy gambles. They're pretty cheap, like less than $20. They got the nylon rope. Those work fine. They do. They'll hoist your deer up and they'll let your deer down. But as time kind of went on, I upgraded to where I have an electronic hoist. I bought my hoist from Harbor Freight. I tied them into my rafters. And then the big thing that I did is I ran wiring down my wall, because if you've ever used one of those electronic hoists, the rope to the remote is only about 4 feet long. So when you hang a deer up, you get your remote literally sitting right in between the hams. It's a big pain in the butt. And so for about $20 worth of wire, I just cut them and splice that remote in so that it can run all the way over to the wall. The big thing that I want to note about when I hang up my deer is that I always hang them up with 2 points of contact. And the reason is not so much because it's easier on the hoist to lift it up for sure, but it's because it prevents the deer from spinning. And if you're listening right now and you've had a deer on a single line gamble, like as you're working on that deer or skinning that deer, you notice like you're walking in circles the whole time, because as you're pulling or pushing, the deer's spinning. So by having a hook in each of its hocks, and when I hoist it up, that deer is held nicely there to where it doesn't want to spin when you're working on it. So I don't know what you're using, Evan, but go ahead and share that.
Yeah. So this is like my most excited part of the podcast. I wanted to hear your reasoning, because I don't know if I've never noticed it or just glossed over it when you guys post, your time lapses or whatever videos of breaking deer down. But I never noticed that you had 2 separate hoists. And the reasoning totally makes sense. I still use just a single hoist with the gambrel on it.
Yep.
And actually in my space, it doubles as a deer processing area, as well as me and my wife's workout area in our garage. So I actually tie off my my hoist or my rope to my squat rack, which is a little bit hilarious, but the double hoist is something that I noticed recently after we started talking about doing this. And it's something that I admittedly have a Harbor Freight hoist, a single hoist in my garage in a box that I've never put up and tied into the rafters. Just one of those things that keeps sliding down the list. But I think a second one is going to be awesome, because I definitely find myself walking around in circles the entire time I'm processing.
Yeah, and it's a luxury, right? I mean, it's definitely not something that you need to have, but for me, when I decided to make this space, I'm like, okay, I'm going to check all the boxes, right? And so even when I had the standard nylon, manual pull up, I've been doing the double gambles for a very long time. And it's because of that, I just hated walking in circles. And so, I think, dude, if you go to that, I think you'll be like, man, I didn't realize how nice this was. And then the other thing too is the way that I process deer, and I'll get into it. If I ever get to a point where I want to separate those 2 back hams, I have them both being held at the same time. So there's also a little bit of convenience factor there, because sometimes with some of the people that I've helped process their deer, it's not the way that I like to, but when they do it, sometimes they'll want to leave a bone in for a roast. And so I usually remove that by the joint instead of sawing it. And that way the carcass is still hanging and the ham that I just removed is still hanging. Rather, if you have one, you know what I mean? It gets all cattywampus. If you've ever had that happen, you know what I'm saying? Like the gamble goes way out of whack, and like sometimes it falls and you're like, crap, So that's my hoist system. And I would tell you this too, Evan, like you don't have to be an electrician. You're obviously a super smart guy. I think it's 5 wires that are in that remote, and it'll be well worth the little bit of money to go and get some wire at Menards or the home store and run that remote down to or at least make it a lot longer, because my father-in-law was the first one to really kind of get the electronic hoist. And still to this day, he cusses that freaking remote because it literally will hang right inside. Yeah, right inside the deer, which you don't want your remote in there, and you don't want your remote to get dirty either. So it's well worth the little bit of money and the very little bit of time to splice those wires together.
Yeah. Now, did you come up with the double hoist yourself, or did you pick that up off of somebody? Because you are the only person that I've ever seen or processed deer do that.
Yeah, it was a thought of my own when I first started to process my own deer in college. My dad's got a metal building at his house, so I would bring my deer there, and I tied in my hoist up in his rafters, and it only took like 3 deer, and I'm like, I'm tired of this, because if I was doing it by myself and I didn't have somebody to hold it, it just was a pain in the butt. And again, it's a lot more economical when you're not having to buy like a powered hoist. Like I said, the manual hoist was $20, so I bought another one and did it. But I've been doing it probably 15 years. And
Wow.
you'll be surprised on the videos that I post, of me breaking down a deer, skinning a deer. I almost bet you, if you look back, a lot of the comments, there's at least one of them is like, 2 hoists. That's a great idea. Like, I don't know why I didn't think of that, just having those 2 points to tie that deer off. It's so nice, man. I'm telling you.
Yeah, that's a change that's going to happen before next season for me, for sure.
So next I wanted to talk about like the knives. I feel like this is, and just, I guess, clause, statement here, like the stuff that me and you were talking about, Evan, there's 100 different ways you can do this, right? So this is just the way that we do it. I'm not saying it's the right way or the best way, just the way that we do it. Same thing with the equipment. And lastly, if there's anybody that still takes their deer to the processor, good on you. There's a ton of really good processors out there. I'm sure they do a fine job. Me and Evan are just at a point where we want to do it ourselves. And I think for me, it's a sense of pride. Like, I really like knowing that, hey, this deer never left my house. Like, I cut it up and I took care of it the right way. I'm happy to, if I want to share my venison with people, like, I know that it was processed correctly. Again, not that a processor doesn't, but there's just a good feeling about it for me. Yes, there's some money savings for sure, but it's also just like a little bit of a, truly from field to freezer aspect from the way that I think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really do. It's one of my favorite things about deer hunting is this aspect here, is processing it yourself. And, I almost am never doing it alone. If I'm doing it, my dad or my brother or my mom will even come out and help. So it really is kind of a family thing for us. And it's great. I really do enjoy it. Some people, find it tedious and annoying to have to deal with it and would rather take it in, and that's totally fine. Like you said, I think doing one, though, will give you a great appreciation for what your processors are going through. And if you're worried about turnaround time or meat yield or anything like that, understand that these processors have hundreds and hundreds of deer
Yeah.
That they're trying to work through. And a really experienced butcher, better than you and I by far, can get through about 12 to 15 deer a day. So if your deer is number 500 in line, you got a long ways to wait, and you may not get all the cuts that you'd get if you had, an afternoon to do it yourself.
I agree, man. So we'll talk about the cuts here in a little bit, but again, still on equipment. So the knives and saws that I use are simple. If you told me, hey, you're gonna take care of this deer, what knives do you need? It would be my skinning knife, which my skinning knife is a very small drop point knife. It's only got like a 3-inch blade on it. I put a very short slip knot to a tether to it. And the reason I do that, I've had a lot of people go like, man, that's a great idea when I show them how I do this, is that when you're skinning a deer, especially when you get to the back skin, a lot of times you can grab it like with both hands and push a lot of it down. You don't have to work it with a knife. So the reason I do that is I can drop my knife and it only hangs down about 6 inches, and then I can still use both my hands, and then I just swing my knife back up. And now when I do it, it looks way natural, but I've done it, I don't even know how many times. So if you do this, there's a trick to it. And if you want to see, if any of the listeners like, hey, can you send me like a video or show me that? Just shoot me a note. I'd be happy to do it. But my skinning knife is not some big knife. I like something that's very delicate and very, dextile in the hand. I like to be able to just have a small knife with a really nice sharp edge on it to take the hide off. And I don't use that same knife for processing my deer. And if you were to use that same knife, I would really advise that you wash that with soap and water, because all the bacteria and contaminants on the deer on the outside. The process of skinning removes all that, and you don't want to take that knife that you just used to, ring around the hocks and cut around any of the skin on that meat that you're going to package and eat. So what do you use, Evan?
Yeah, absolutely. So I also have a small skinning knife. I like the idea of having it tethered though, because I've admittedly dropped it a few times when skinning a deer, trying to do that. So I'll definitely incorporate the tether as well. But a small skinning knife, we typically try to pull as much as we can, as long as you can keep that little membrane on the back skin on the deer. That's something that it is exponentially harder to skin a deer if you don't keep that membrane on the back. And then I've got several. I've got a kind of a little box full of boning knives, like a flex. It's somewhere between, like a fillet knife. It's not quite as flexible as a fillet knife, but it still does have some flex to it. And I'm somebody who, when I sharpen my knives, I'm not good enough to just have the sharpener stick, and there's a name for that.
Steel.
But, I'm not good enough to do that on the fly and keep going. So I'll have 5 to 6, pre-sharpened boning knives, ready to go. And if I notice one that's starting to lose an edge a little bit, I'll just grab another one. So I use like a 6-inch, and a 5-inch. I've got both. And then the little skinning knife.
Yep. So for my boning and my knives that I use on the meat is very similar to what you were saying. I like, just as you alluded to, something that is semi-rigid but also flexible, and it really is called, just like you said, a boning knife. Now, on the trimming table, I do keep a fillet knife on there. I found that a fillet knife works pretty well to try to remove the silver skin off of, say, the back straps, or some of the other things where I have a really thin blade that I can get right in between the silver skin and work it off without taking little red meat off as possible. And then for the saw that I use, when I actually break down a deer, I don't use any saw other than a Sawzall to cut off typically the front ends of the front quarters. That's it. I'll just I'll usually skin my deer down to around the middle of that shank on the deer on the front leg, and then I just, as vulgar or barbaric as it is, I just take the Sawzall and cut right through it. That's it. Because as I pull my deer off of my meat off the carcass, I leave the entire skeletal structure standing, and we can get in that in a little bit. But I don't know. How about you? Do you use any saws when you process your deer, Evan?
Yeah, yep. I'm the same way. I have a separate Sawzall that I will use it typically only for the front quarters, like you said, and I try to avoid using it anywhere else, just because if you have to, that's one thing, but it does kind of throw the bone shrapnel everywhere. So yeah. I try to avoid using it if I can, but I do tend to reach for it on the front quarters.
So then, as far as a cutting table goes, I bought this, a long time ago, and I bought it off Craigslist when Craigslist was before Facebook Marketplace, obviously. But I've got a really nice 10-foot long stainless steel cutting board table, and it's got 2 removable sections of cutting board on it. So that works. It's awesome. I've had it for, like I said, 10 years or better, and it sits directly on there. I don't use the LEM meat totes for one reason. They're a lot shallower than I would like them to be.
Short.
So I actually, if you guys have a Sam's Club or a Costco, here's a little trick. You can find like a dishwashing tub. And that dishwashing tub, you'll find that a lot of the LEM like lids and drip trays fit in that really well, but it's about 4 inches taller. So that's what I use. Typically when we break down a deer, we'll use about 4 or 5 of those if we need them. And so as I break down the deer, it goes to the trimming table that I just told you about. And then inside of those tubs, depending if it needs to get trimmed or if it needs to get ground or if it's ready for packaging.
Yeah, awesome. You have a little bit more space to work with, and I've always admired your kind of. It almost looks like a kitchen, like an industrial, like a restaurant kitchen in your shop, which is awesome. I don't have that much space, so I have a series of folding tables and a folding fillet table, which is actually essentially it's a folding table that is one giant cutting board.
Nice.
And it'll have you can hook up a hose to it. Basically it's for filleting fish is what it is.
Yeah.
But they're cheap. They're $60, $70 at Cabela's or Bass Pro or whatever. And it's literally a table that's got, a ridge around the edge for the, where the juices will collect, so it won't just fold off the edge. But it's basically a folding cutting board. And so I've got that, and that all packs back up and goes into the back of the garage, and our workout area is restored. So I have much more of a folding and put it out of sight, out of mind, where you've got more of a permanent setup, which is what I want to get to as we keep upgrading moving forward. But yeah, I'm all folding and in and out with the tables.
Yep. Hey, dude, those work really well. I mean, I'll tell you, when I first started cutting my deer, I didn't make, I kind of makeshift made, but I was working at Jelensky's Sporting Goods when I was in college, and they renovated their back room. And so they had these really big, very sturdily built workbenches. And I was like, I want one. If you're, they were just throwing them away. So I got it for free. It had carpet on the tabletop because Jelensky's still is and was and still is like a very well-known firearms dealer in Wisconsin, in Racine, Wisconsin. So naturally for me, I was like, oh, I'd love to work there. And I was lucky enough to. I had a lot of great memories there. But I had this carpet tabletop, which is totally not what you want when you're cutting up any deer. I revamped the tabletop with just like plywood. I would use cutting boards, and I put casters on it so I could roll it around in my dad's garage. So you're light years ahead of where I started, man. I had a free hand-me-down carpet top workbench that came out of the back of a gun shop. So you're doing all right, Evan. Don't worry. You're doing just fine. So then do you guys grind your own deer? How far down the process do you refine it? Because I have my own grinder, and this year actually I upgraded to the biggest one that LEM makes. It's the 32. It's a horse and a half. It's a freaking hog, man. But I always felt for me that when we got to processing our deer, the grinding was the bottleneck, and it was really just dictated by how fast we could feed the grinder. But do you guys do that at your house?
Yeah, yep. So we take it all the way to the grind. So this is something that I am working on upgrading. This will be probably the next upgrade that I make. I've got a half horse right now.
Yep.
It's just a Cabela. I think it's like the Cabela's Pro Series or so. I can't even remember. But it works okay. But you're right. It definitely is the bottleneck. A little tip that I picked up. I can't remember where I picked this up, but a lot of people will cut their ground into cubes. We keep it as long of a strip that will fit into that worm gear as possible. And as you feed the grinder, it'll kind of just suck that strip down through. So we hardly ever use the little masher that comes with the grinders to stuff stuff down the thing. You want to keep them in the long strips and feed it through that way. So yeah, we do grind it. A bigger grinder is definitely something I'm interested in, because we do also use the grinder as we'll get to later. We'll grind when we go to make our sausages too. So that definitely turns into a bottleneck, because you're trying to feed pork trimmings and ground venison through there at the same time, and double grind and all that stuff. So we are in the market for a new grinder.
Yeah. So do you guys, I was going to ask you that, do you single grind or double grind your venison? Everything that I do, I always double grind. Actually, you'll have your different wheels or your cutting plates that are for your grinder. And the biggest one is usually known as like the stuffing plate. I'll always do a single grind of that first. I feel like I just get a little bit more consistency out of my ground. I don't know what you do, but that's how I run whether it's raw deer or if I'm making, breakfast sausage or summer sausage, that's kind of what I do.
Yeah. So I like to, I single grind everything, number one, and then I will package some that is single grind. That I'm planning, like say the trimmings that we're going to make for sausage, I'll keep that ground once, so that I'm not, I guess, triple grinding it, if you will, when we get to the sausage portion. So all the sausage trimmings and stuff I grind once, like you said, on that coarse plate or stuffing plate or whatever. But if it's ground that we're going to eat, I do double grind it as well.
Yep. Same with me. And another trick that I found too is that in between my first and my second grind, I'll lay it out in those meat tubs, if you say. And when it's cold in the winter, I'll set it outside. But if it not, I'll set it in the deep freeze. And getting it to like halfway frozen seems to be about perfect for me. And that's, again, if you have the ability to do that. I found that it seems to have, like, again, that much more consistent texture when I go to what we typically do. Is there's the 1/4 inch plate that we like to do for, like, if we're doing ground deer, like deer that we're going to use for tacos or lasagna or sloppy joes, anything like that. When you think of like ground beef, like I use the 1/4 inch. I never go really fine. I don't know where you kind of stop at, Evan.
Yeah, no, I stop there too. The only time we'll go to a fine is for when we're stuffing into like a sausage that you're going to cook later.
Yes.
Like a if you're doing brats or Italian sausages or something like that. It's something that you're going to cook later. We'll go to a fine. But everything else we keep that 1/4 inch plate on. All
right. So now let's get into breaking down a deer. And so I'll kind of walk through how I do it, and feel free to step in if you say, hey, I do this different, or I found this trick or something. But it's self-explanatory. You got a deer up, we hang it up by its hocks. You skin it all the way down, and I remove the head. Same thing with you, I assume, right, Evan?
Yep.
And so this is where I kind of do things maybe unorthodox. And again, it's all self-taught here. Nobody in my family was a butcher. And really, when I started doing this stuff, I was a young college kid. And even though YouTube was around, it's trial and error. So the way I start is I always take the front shoulders off. And we never cut any steaks out of the shoulders, just because a venison shoulder is quite a bit smaller than a beef shoulder. And that goes straight into a tub. And like you said, usually my wife or a friend or somebody starts working on it to trim it down, and that goes to the grinder. How about you?
Yeah. So I have, I guess, a couple things to add there. Right after I finish skinning it down, I've got a big, like a propane torch. And I'll run that propane torch over the carcass really quickly, just to burn off any hair that you may have transferred. Now, as you get better at skinning, there will be less and less hair that gets transferred onto the carcass, but inevitably you'll have some from your hands and your whatever you're wearing will get transferred on there. So right when we get it skinned out, I run the propane torch over it just real quick. It doesn't smell the greatest in the garage.
Oh, but I hate that.
Yeah. Yep. So we zip the propane torch over the top of it. And then, we start with the front shoulders, and actually something that we'll get into it when we get to our recipes later on. But, I leave all of my front shoulders whole, as of probably 3 years ago.
Ooh, I can't wait to hear this, because I hate working on front shoulders. They're the worst, man.
Yes. So that is, I found a recipe that we'll talk about later. And ever since then, I leave all of my front shoulders because they seem like just the juice is not worth the squeeze. When you're trying to trim out a front shoulder, you get a lot of sausage trimmings, a lot of stuff that's tough to use, and you're working on it for a long time, and you don't seem like you get all that much meat off of it. So I leave all of my front shoulders whole, and I'll wrap them. I've got like an industrial roll of plastic wrap, like what you use to wrap a pallet with. And so we'll wrap it in that and then freezer paper, and I keep all of my front shoulders whole. So I've got a shelf
with the bone on
freezer with the bone. Yep.
So how low to that joint? So for the listeners that haven't processed your own deer, the front shoulders are not held on to the body by a joint. It's actually all muscular. So the only joints in a deer's front quarter is between like what would be your shoulder joint and elbow your elbow and the wrist, essentially a deer's hoof. And the front bone has a joint, and then there's the other one, which would be equivalent to our elbow. But they don't have a shoulder joint like we do. So how far down that joint that you kind of cut with a Sawzall, do you leave that on there as well, or do you take it all the way back to the joint?
So yeah, I'll go basically back up to the joint. Take the shank, basically take the shank off.
Got it.
And that'll go into trimming, and then break that joint off, and then that kind of, it's maybe, I don't know, 14 inches, 15 inches big. Mm-hmm. That whole top meaty part of the shoulder, we keep whole.
Wow. So the whole plate and everything. All right. We'll get into that later. I'm excited to
Yeah.
hear that. We don't do that, and like my wife hates shoulders. She's done hundreds of them. She's super good at it now. And same thing with Grant. Grant's usually the guy on the table. Side note about that propane thing. I hate the smell of burnt hair. So like I am a hair Nazi, and when you have our friends come over to use it, I'm like, hey, let me get the skin started for you. I'm not saying I'm the best freaking deer skinner out here, but I'm pretty careful. And a good trick to eliminate, because really once you get the hair rolled down the back or the skin rolled down the back, you don't have an opportunity for a lot of hair to get on the meat. It's really when you're making your splits up those hams that you can start to get, and when you make your cut around the hock, that hair falls on the meat, at least in my experience.
Yep.
So a good trick there is that when you're cutting through that, cut from the bottom of the skin, so you're not cutting the hair in half, but you're more or less spreading the follicles, and that'll eliminate some of the hair that comes down there. But yeah, that's a good point. I know a lot of people that do that too, Evan, that'll take the butane or propane torch and just, evaporate the hair essentially. But God, it stinks, dude. Oh
Yeah, it's terrible.
Man, it's so bad. Yeah. Okay, we got the front shoulders off. For me, they go into bins to get trimmed and put into grind. For Evan, he's got a super secret recipe that I can't wait to hear about. Next thing that I tackle is I will take the neck roast off. And with a doe, they're pretty small. There's not much meat, but on a buck, there's a lot of meat there. And so I split it straight down the back. There's a nice white line. You can't miss it. And I'll fold one side off to the esophagus, cut that, take the other side off to the esophagus, cut that. And now the neck can be a nightmare if you're really, really, really picky about fat. I am. And I bet you my venison is like 98, 99% lean. But the neck is something that I just don't separate each muscle, because there are dozens of muscles in there. I'll make sure there's one big rubbery band that you need to make sure that you remove. And then other than that, just as Evan said, we'll cut it into long strips. That goes into grind/sausage. What about you, sir?
Yeah, so the big rubbery band, we're very similar with how we do it. You split it right down the backside, run it around the esophagus, and then we pull that band that you're talking about, if you will, out, and then we leave them whole. So this is going to work out great, because two of my recipes I want to talk about are two of the hardest parts of the deer to deal with. So I've got a neck roast recipe that's a little bit of a not your traditional pot roast that everybody does. And then the front shoulder is also a pain in the butt. So I leave my neck roast whole as well.
I'm going to have to make sure my wife doesn't listen to this podcast, because she'll never want to process deer the way that we've done it for years. Because you're right, dude. Those are the two. Once you get past those, it's like smooth sailing, man.
Yep, it is.
So then after I get those off, I go to like the coveted cut, the back straps. And the way that I do my back straps is, especially on a doe, you're going to have a lot of fat. And even on a buck, there'll be a small thin lining. So I'll pick on one side first, and I'll make my cut. And there's a flap there that's in between the back strap and like what would be the skin. And sometimes it's only a 16-inch thick, or sometimes, like I said, especially towards the hind quarter, it can get over an inch. So I'll take that off to expose the entire back strap. And then I just work my knife on the spine side down all the way. And then I'll start from the top, which would be like the hind quarter side, make an angled cut across, and then I pull that back strap out whole. And then typically with the way that we like to eat them is that we'll cut those into nice healthy steaks, a good 2.5 inches thick, to make a nice portion, and we'll grill those. But we'll also cut them into about 8-inch chunks that we'll use for like bacon rack back straps that we put in the oven. What about you?
Yeah, so pretty similar, but a little bit different. That layer of fat, and again, this is, guys listening, this is all, everybody has their own way to do this, and there's no right or wrong way. But I leave that fat there. I make that initial cut you're talking about down the spine, basically with the fat. I'll have to send you a picture of it so you can see. But I'll make that cut down the spine all the way down, kind of through the fat or over top of the fat, all the way down to the ribs, where you'll hear that clicking noise as you're coming down the ribs and the vertebrae there.
Yep.
And then I make that same angled cut that you're talking about at the very top end, which would be the deer's rear end. and then I will reach my hand in there, and you can actually kind of pull the backstrap out from the inside and not have to deal with cutting all that fat away at the start. So I'll make my initial cuts, and then I do most of my backstrap work with my hands once I get those initial cuts made.
Right.
And I leave the fat there and just kind of peel it out from the inside.
Yeah. So you're saying you peel it away from the deer, right? But so when you go to the cutting table, you cut that fat off, correct?
The backstrap will actually just fold right out of there without that fat on it.
I get what you're saying. I see what you roll it out and away.
Yep.
I totally get what you're saying now. So I guess, 6 1/2 a dozen, right? I like to do that your method too. I'm going to have to try that just because I get where you're saying where when you kind of like roll it out and away from the deer and you pull the fat off because that fat membrane really isn't stuck to it. I like stick my finger and work it up and down, and then I just trim it off. And that way I kind of see what I'm working with because, regardless, like still got to take that silver skin kind of off of the backstrap when you get to the table.
Yep.
Yes, I got you. So we got the coveted backstraps off. Boom, they're at the cutting table, easy breezy. Next is where I pick on the hindquarters. And again, I do mine maybe kind of weird, but I take them off muscle by muscle. I know a lot of guys will sometimes make a plunge cut, debone it, and take it to the table. I do this for a couple reasons. First, and the biggest reason is that, usually it's either myself or me and one other person, like Logan or Grant or one of the buddies that's come over to do it. And that way the table doesn't get like just bombarded with meat. So I do that. And then I also think that I can cut my roast off a little bit easier doing this. So when I start, I'll go through my whole hindquarter spiel and then you can do yours, Evan. When I start, there's a small triangular piece of meat that goes to grind right on the very front, and it sits underneath like what would be the round eye, or some people, like I call it the football roast of the deer. It's literally shaped kind of like a football. I pluck that little triangle off, it goes into the trimming bin. Next would be like the round eye, and this is the one that encompasses like the bottom of the femur. And so I'll take that one off. I'll go around the knuckle of the joint, and that one will literally fall right down into your hand. You cut it off. That roast is fantastic for any of your pot roasts. We almost always save this roast for when we do some of our crock pot recipes. Next, I go work to the outside of the hindquarter, and there's going to be, I don't know the terminology for it. Again, I'm not a butcher, but it's a very elongated, straight-grained roast. We usually call this the jerky roast. For me, it's the best roast if you're going to make deer jerky that you can cut up into jerky because it's very lean. Really, once you trim it down, it's kind of shaped like a rectangle, and it's good sized. Working up the hind again, there's like the round eye, I believe, or like the bonus loin, some people call them. It's a tubular steak or roast that's in there. And there's an important factor here about this, whether you take it off on the table or do it on the deer. But tucked right underneath there is a gland that sits between this and really the largest roast on the deer. So after you remove that, we usually either will grind that or we'll cut that up into medallions for like if we do something on the grill with kebabs, because can you grill it like a tenderloin or like a roast? Absolutely, you can. But we usually just don't. We will, like I said, I'll usually cut it up into about 1/2 inch thick medallions, and we'll throw it on like kebabs. Next is, like I said, there's that important gland that's inside of a deer. That gland will run up to the back of the shank, and it'll run all the way across to the joint. And you want to make sure and you remove that. I've seen a lot of guys that don't, and I could just only imagine the poor guy that takes a bite out of that roast and gets the, you know what I'm talking about, right, Evan?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's really pronounced on a buck, and especially during the rut, you'll notice it's big and it's large. And I've never cut one open, but it's got something in there that I don't want to mess with. So next is one of the only times that I'm kind of wasteful on a deer. That last roast that's on like what would be the hindquarter, and it's, like I said, it's the largest one. There's a small flap that sits on the inside, and it's, even on a buck, it's only maybe about 1/4 inch thick. I'll take that roast off and discard it. And the reason is that it may be only several ounces of venison, but that is the only part of the deer that you'll notice is probably discolored if you've let it hang for a little while. And it's also the only part of the deer that really, when you did your field dressing job, even if you made a good shot, had any contact to that. So I discard that, and then I'll trim any, there's a little bit of like maybe air exposed meat if the deer's hanging with skin on still that you need to get to. And then I'll just take that other roast off, and we'll cut that one up, and either we'll save it for a crock pot meal, or that one we'll additionally grind. So that's how I tackle my hind quarter in a condensed version. I mean, Evan, you go and explain yours.
Yeah, awesome. So I have done it the way you're talking about. A couple of the guys I hunt with in Southern Ohio actually drive up from Virginia, and they are big on the gutless method, which was interesting for me to learn because it was totally different from anything I've ever done. They basically don't field dress the deer, and they process it while it's hanging with the guts in it. The only thing I really don't like about that is you lose the inner loins when you do
Correct.
it that way. But it was the same process in terms of the hindquarters. So I have done it that way. I prefer to get them off and get it onto the table. That's how I do it. So I'll start at this point. I typically will cut after the back straps and everything are out. I'll typically cut the rib cage and spine away. Drop that down, so all I have left hanging is the two hindquarters.
Yep.
And there's a little, I think they call it an H bone that runs along the backside of the pelvis that you have to kind of weasel your way around. And then if you follow the pelvis, depending on how you field dress your deer, it'll either be split open or that pelvis will still be together. People do it both ways. But you'll basically follow the pelvis around until you find the area where the femur connects into the pelvis. And once you get to that point, you can just take your knife and kind of jab it into that joint, and it'll break away. And then you're left with, one side or one quarter. And at that point it goes to the table, repeated on the other side. So we get the pelvis out of there. And then it's very similar, except mine is going to be now flat on a table. So I'll basically take my knife, run it from along the bone, from the shank all the way up to the knee. Once you hit the knee, you kind of make a little half circle around the knee and connect it back like just above the knee where the meat runs there. So you're kind of cutting out and around the knee. And then from there, the way the muscle groups line up, you can take that ball that you exposed of the femur and basically run your knife straight down, and it's going to be really close, if not dead on, to where the split of, I think you called it the football roast. It'll run right along that, and you can connect the ball of your. Again, we're not butchers, so I apologize.
I know, right?
This is kind of getting out of hand here, but you'll connect the ball of the femur down to the knee, and then I literally debone the hindquarter. So I'll kind of pick away with my knife and go straight around that femur, and then I pull all the bones out at once, and what I'm left with is all of the meat in one piece, without the femur running through the middle of it. And then at that point, you can literally, with your hands, spread the entire hindquarter out. And a lot of it will just come off with your hands, with, pulling it out of that silver skin. So you'll take the football roast out, the jerky roast. I know exactly what you're talking about. The little eye of round, I think, is the bonus loin. I do know that one.
Yep.
And then, it typically at this point is when we would, like I said, we've been dry aging. So that extra flap that you say you discarded, or you discard because of it has contact with your gut job or air or whatever. That's kind of a given for us, because that's all kind of caramelized and
it's hardened,
crystalled over, hardened up. So that comes off for us either way, and then you'll make maybe a couple more cuts to get that any additional meat that was potentially exposed to the air that it's noticeable. It's got a different color to it. But yeah, so I will rip all of that up, and then the only thing that I I need to, but I haven't saved those roasts you're talking about for the crock pot, typically because I'll have neck roasts for that.
Mm-hmm.
I put almost all of that into grind except for the jerky roast, because that is, I actually just made some jerky last night, but it's a very easy, it's already in a rectangle. You can see exactly which way the grain of the meat runs. And if you cut that jerky against the grain, your slices, that is what I use to make my jerky.
Dude, it's like literally made for it. So
yes,
there is one other cut that I left out to see if you would talk about it, and it's actually my favorite piece of venison on the entire deer. This is including the inner loins and the back straps. But when you make that cut on the back strap, like we talked about, there is a small piece of meat. It's not small, actually. It's usually about the size of your hand, like the size of a bluegill, normal size bluegill, that's tucked up underneath all of those roasts, and it's pressed directly against the pelvis. And it's actually the very bottom or top, whichever way you want to look at it, of the back strap. Do you know what I'm talking about, Evan?
Yep.
So I call those like the back strap tips, and they're a lot flatter than a back strap, and they're super lean and they're super tender, and I'll trim that up to be like about a normal size, because there's kind of a little weird hook to it where it's if it attaches, if you know what I'm talking about, Evan.
Yep.
And dude, those things, like I those are my absolute hand me down. Like, give me those. Let me do like a little rub on them and cook those on the grill to 125. They're like my absolute favorite steaks that come off a deer.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna have to pay a little closer attention to those. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I've always just thrown them in the
Oh
pot.
my
So
gosh.
yeah.
You know what because that's where you cut the backstrap, quote unquote, because the backstrap plunges underneath those other roasts that are there, and you can't get to it until you, like you said, unfold everything and separate it by skin. But yeah, dude, try that out next time. I'm telling you, if you think the backstraps are tender, this is like next level.
Yeah, I have to. I'm concerned that I'm just hearing about this now. So
hey, man, everybody does their own thing. So
yeah.
I think we're very similar. The only thing, how long do you dry age your deer? 2 weeks, 3 weeks? I mean, beef is usually like 21 days, something around there.
Yeah. So we just did my dad's doe actually last week or earlier. No, let's see. We did it Monday, so we did it earlier this week. That's kind of where I got the idea to talk about this today, because we were in the process of doing that. And that deer, I believe, was shot on the 13th of December, and we did it on the 4th. So about 3 weeks. That's probably as long as we're gonna let him go.
Mm-hmm.
And it I don't know, maybe it's just I would love to do side by side one that was shot, that day or the day before versus one that's been hanging for a while. Just so I could actually have a good comparison. But I do feel like the meat is, you got to be a little bit more careful if you're using your hands. It does seem to like you'll poke through it a little easier. But I don't necessarily have a direct comparison if it makes a difference or not. Some people swear by it. Other people say it doesn't make a difference. We've enjoyed it and liked doing it that way. And yeah, so we've typically 2 to 3 weeks is our goal if it's available.
Yeah, and again, there's also, I feel like a little bit of a convenience factor in the sense that most guys don't have the luxury to be able to let them hang just because they don't have a place for it, right? So
yep.
It is, my rule of thumb is unless it's a very rare situation where it's super warm or somebody came hunting and they're leaving the next day, like, I don't like to process deer right away. The meat is really hard to work with. It's a lot bloodier. It's slippier. It doesn't package as well. Like, my rule of thumb is to let a deer hang for like 24 to 48 hours, weather permitting. And I do it the hard way too. I leave the skin on because that way it's a little bit less trimming that I have to do on my end with the roast. Cause like you probably don't leave the skin on when you hang your deer, do you?
Depends. Sometimes we will. This one that my dad shot, we did leave the skin on it.
Sure. And a lot of people think like, oh my God, it's glued on. It's not really that bad.
No, it's very easy if they've been hanging for a while, actually.
Yeah. So, but you kind of know what I'm talking about, Evan. If you get into butchering a deer right away, it's actually harder, in my opinion, than letting that meat firm up and kind of sit for at least, like I said, 24 hours.
Yep, it's harder and a lot messier. We've done
way
it
messier.
We had that situation you're talking about. It was warm. Had to get it done that day, and tried to let it hang for as long as we could before my brother had to get moving, and we let it hang for maybe an hour and a half, and it was a massacre. It was terrible. I'll never do it again.
I know. So in a nutshell, that's how we process our deer. The only other thing we didn't talk about, and I know you do the same thing we do, is we vacuum package everything that we can, even including our ground deer. And I started doing this probably a long time ago, 10 years ago. And it's nice. For a while, we used to do the bags where we'd put them in like the bags and either use like a hog ring or a zip tie or even like the tape gun to close it off. But the reason why we appreciate doing them we usually do it in, if it's like breakfast sausage, we'll do 1 pound bags. But for just regular ground deer or turkey or anything else, we'll do 2 pound packages. And we'll weigh it out and we'll put it into like a bag, and then we'll vacuum pack it, and then we squish it flat. So like our packages are approximately 8 inches by 8 inch squares that are maybe an inch thick. And two nice things. First off, they stack in the freezer so nice. Perfect. And then secondly, they thaw out in literally less than an hour. Like if you take one out and set it on the counter. So, if we ever need to do a wing it meal where we're doing like tacos or any of the thing you use ground beef for, we can have it thawed out really quick. So that's why, and then every other cut goes into the vacuum packer as well.
Yep, we're the same way. We've got the little flat bricks that stack up in the bottom of the freezer. We've done it all. We still have the tape gun and twist and tape and the hog ring and all that stuff. It'll work. It's fine. But we if we have the bags and the ability to do it, we will vac seal whatever we can. If you run out of bags or whatever, we've got the stuff to do, your standard, the little camo wild game bags that you put through the tape gun. We got those too, if we need it. But yeah, we try to vac seal everything.
Oh, man. And it's cleaner. Like I just like knowing that if I take, anything out of the freezer in a vacuum bag and put it in the refrigerator to thaw out for a couple of days, I won't have to worry about blood running all over the refrigerator.
Yep.
It's a huge convenience for us to do that. So, all right, let's get into sausage making, dude. Do you guys process your own summer sausage?
Yeah. Yep. So this is my favorite. This is awesome. We started doing this a couple years ago. We call it started off as a joke, but my uncle, my dad, my brother, any buddies that want to jump in on it, we call it the sausage party.
Same thing here. We literally call it the sausage. Yep.
Yep. So everybody comes over usually end of February. And whatever, we kind of come up with whatever recipes or whatever kind of sausage we want to make. Someone will run out and go grab whatever casings and all that stuff we need. And there will be, I think we did close to 120 pounds last year.
You got to get those numbers up, dude.
Yeah, no, I know. Well, that was 3 of us. So that was, we'll get there.
So we do the same thing, very similar. It's been, I guess, quite not as big as it has been in the years past, but the record there's 4 of us that kind of have pitched in to do this, and our record was like 420 pounds in a day. It was way too much, man. First off, at the end of the day, we were all drunker than 10 Indians, because you drink beer the whole time. And then secondly, it just takes a long time, man.
It does.
So caveat, one of the cool things that my wife and I have started doing this will be our 4th year, is that there's a local farmer that we'll buy a live hog from, and we'll butcher it. So, it's kind of nice to have all of the pork that we need for making summer sausage. The way that I do mine is I'll usually do like 2-to-1 mix for, venison pork. I don't know what you guys usually use, Evan. What do you cut your what's your ratio for your deer to pork or whatever your trimmings?
Yeah. So we somewhat similar. I do love the fact that you guys support a local farmer. That's something I'll have to look into. It's
way cheaper too. Way cheaper, man.
we've got a local meat market that's probably 20 minutes away from my place, and if you just go into the back, you can talk to the butchers, and they'll rip you off whatever trimmings and whatever you want. And they've got all the casings, all the legs, the LEM, all the different cures and everything you need. So I'm a regular up there this time of year. But yeah, I do 20% pork on anything I'm smoking. And then I do 40% on anything I'm cooking later.
So do you only cut it with like pork trimmings, or do you use like legitimate pork? So when I do mine, it's, like I said, it's usually about 1/3 pork. And, but that's me taking it off. Typically I'll use like the Boston butt or the pork shoulders for this, and
Yep.
even some of the hams too. And I'm very sparing on when I trim it. So it's got a lot of the fat mixed in, but it also has a lot of pork meat content as well. Are you just using the trimmings, or are you using, legitimate pork?
No, it'll be legitimate pork. We'll also have, like you said, the Boston butter, the shoulder is typically the best. It also works really well to slice that up and feed it through the grinder the same way you did the venison.
Mm-hmm.
But we also will buy just pork trimmings as well from the meat market up there.
Yeah. So okay. So that's our brick and mortar mix, right? Your
Yep.
2-to-1 is kind of what I do. Sounds like you're right in that range ballpark, a little bit heavier on one side and a little bit leaner on the other.
Yep.
I also, all of our summer sausage, I add cheese to, and I usually try to add about 1 pound per 10 pounds. There's a meat market here that sells it. Huge thing to remember. If you're going to add sausage to your cheese to your summer sausage, you have to use high temperature cheese. You can't just go buy like cheese from the store. You will not have the same outcome. And do you add sausage or cheese to your summer sausage?
Yes. Yep. And the same, I'm going to hit on the meat market again. They sell all the different, I think they have 5 or 6 different high temp cheeses that you can buy up there.
Yep. Same thing. So we buy ours in 5-pound bags, and we just, cut it in half. So like 2.5 pounds roughly for one batch of sausage. And it seems to work out really well to the meat to cheese ratio. The seasoning that I use my base seasoning is called the Besh. It's a seasoning and cure mixture 1-in-1. It's not crazy expensive. It's a German summer sausage seasoning. You can find it in a lot of different places, but that's kind of like my baseline. And then from there, I'll start doctoring it up. I've got kind of 3 flavors that I've mastered over the years. One is the tried and true jalapeno and cheddar. Another one is a caramelized onion, roasted garlic with mozzarella cheese.
Ooh.
And then I do another one that is becoming hands down the favorite. It's like a sweet pepper with some green olives and then Gouda cheese. And that seems to be the knockout one, even though like the caramelized onion and garlic is really good as well. Each of them are different. I use different cheeses in them. But those are the 3 flavors that I make religiously every year.
That you're tempting me with the, I'm not a big olive guy, so I probably wouldn't go that route. I'll try it. But,
So me neither, dude. Here's the thing. So like I don't put a lot of green olives in there, but it adds a little saltiness to it. So I'll use a sweet red pepper, and I use the juices and everything when I make this. But I don't go heavy on the olives, because trust me, I'm not James Bond martini guy, and I never was like the kid that could eat the green olives out, but I was surprised. I was hesitant the first year that I made it, but and if you don't like them, don't put it in there. But it gives it, like I said, there's a little bit of saltiness to it. The last thing that we have is my wife's got a garden, and she has jalapenos. We're not into spicy, but I feel like summer sausage should have just a little bit of a heat to it. So we'll actually dehydrate some peppers, and we have one little food processor. That's all we use it for, is like mulching up the jalapenos and the dust.
Nice.
And we'll add some of that jalapeno dust in accordingly to kind of, like I said, not make it unbearable at any means. Like, I'm not a guy that loves hot stuff, but just a little bit of a kick.
Very nice.
So what flavors do you make over there?
So I'm typically just I do a plain. I've got the base I think it's legs that they keep up there, but just their basic summer sausage, that's like you said, your baseline. I've got some family members that really just like the plain summer sausage. So
Sure.
I'll typically just do a probably about 50-50 plain and the jalapeno and cheddar. That's the standard. I do something a little different that I actually picked this up off of a processor in one of these Facebook deer processing groups, but high temp cheddar again, similar ratio, 1 pound to 10 pound. And then we actually use, you can buy the jalapenos that you'd like put on a nacho plate or something.
Yeah,
or like
they're
nachos at
sweet
home.
and
So the
spicy.
pickled,
Yep.
Yeah, the pickled type jalapenos. So we will actually use those, feed them into the grinder while we're grinding it, and then we save that the juice or the canned juice from those. And instead of, we haven't mentioned this, but as you're making sausage, you have to add water to
Correct.
it, right? So we'll do kind of a 50-50 mix we'll put water, and we'll also pour the juice from those pickled jalapenos to kind of help lube that sausage up. And it really gets that jalapeno flavor throughout the entire.
Yes.
You don't have to have a piece of jalapeno to get that while you're eating it. So a little bit different there.
No, we do the same thing, literally.
Do you?
Yes.
Okay.
So I use the jalapeno dust for that. And the reason is, Evan, is like when we've done it before with fresh jalapenos, and I did not like the fact that they had like a little bit of a crunch to them. They still were cooked and they were soft, but it's not like I sauteed them or anything. Where like, a pickled jalapeno is very soft in texture, and it's more consistent with what you'd think a summer sausage would be. And you hit it on the head by adding that juice in there. You get the jalapeno flavor without the jalapeno heat. So yeah, dude, me and you are made of the same string when it comes to that.
Yeah.
So perfect. I guess, let's talk about some of the tips and tricks. So the process that we have a 25-pound meat mixer. We weigh everything out. I don't pre-grind, where it sounds like you pre-grind your venison. So in the day that we make sausage, we'll grind all of our venison and pork, that day. And so we do that. It goes into the meat mixer. I'll mix the raw meat for a little while, and then I'll add my seasoning and cure and any other of the flavors that we talked about. From there, just as you alluded, you need to typically add a little bit of water to help with it stuffing. I've got a hand cranked 25-pound stuffer. And let me tell you, it's not easy. Like, I got to stand on this thing to stuff the freaking casings, but we usually do like 3-pound logs, the larger style logs. And then set those aside. I don't usually, do you let yours sit overnight and cure out, quote unquote, or do you go right to like the smoker or the oven?
They go right to the smoker.
So do I. Okay.
Yeah.
So, on the instructions say you need to like refrigerate them for 24 hours or something to let them cure. We've not done that for sake of time, and I've never had any issues. So I'm glad that you said that.
Yep.
How about you? What's your process of kind of getting your meat mixture made up?
Yes, the mixer is on my list. We do not have one of those. It would be fantastic if we did, but typically everybody will take turns because your hands will be absolutely frozen after about 5 minutes of trying to mix this stuff by hand.
Oh yeah.
But we've got big. I know you talked about the bussing totes or the dish totes. We also have, when we get into making large batches of summer sausage, those things kind of get filled up. When you get 25 pounds of meat in them, they're pretty full. So we've got big, almost like plastic, like storage totes, if you will, that we'll use specifically for mixing, where you can kind of put it on a chair and stand over top of it. And it's, 14 to 16 inches deep. And those are literally just for mixing. So we're manual mixers at the moment. I do not have a 25-pound stuffer. I've got a smaller one, an Elliott. I think it's 10-pound. But I like that. I wish I had a 25-pound. Obviously, I don't necessarily have the space for that, but I like the ease of the smaller one. It's not. I don't have to stand on it. I can do it. I can operate it myself. So yeah, we do we'll do summer sausage, but we also do a lot of like the little, meat sticks and snack sticks and stuff like that, and bratwurst and all that. So the little one hasn't been too big of a bottleneck for us yet, but if we get up to that 400-pound number, it probably would be.
Yeah, you know what? Like, and like you said, here's the thing. Even with that 25-pound mixture in a normal batch of summer sausage, I have to fill it more than once. Like, it won't take the whole thing, because I usually do like 20 pounds venison, 10 pounds pork, and then cheese. It just is a simple way to weigh things out. So even regardless, I still got to back it all the way out and throw it back in.
Yep.
And I guess I didn't even think about that. You're probably 100% right, because the can, if you will, for that stuffer is so much smaller, it wouldn't be near as hard to crank.
Yep.
And complimenting what you said again, if you're doing snack sticks or brats, usually you're not going to make 25 pounds or 30 pounds of those, so right. It's totally justified. That's one thing that I've never gotten into. I've done snack sticks before, and man, those are very temperamental. You really have to know how long and how hot to get those to have that good consistency. Yep. So I just said, foobar that, no way. I'm not doing that. And then the brats was the same thing. It's a much different process. It's a lot more delicate, especially to wind them and get them right. Yep. And get them about the same size. So I just do summer sausage. I give it Christmas gifts and to my clients and buddies and all kinds of people. So I make a good amount every year. But anything you want to add on those summer sticks or those brats, anything that you found that works really well, or seasoning or cures, anything you want to inject here about that?
Yes. If you're going to do the snack sticks, a lot of these stuffers will come with a series of stuffing tubes, or I think you call them horns maybe, but it'll come with a series, and I would be willing to bet 95% of them do not have a tube that is small enough to stuff a traditional snack stick sized casing. So if you're going to go that route, which is again more tedious, as you mentioned, Garrett, definitely more tedious. You definitely got to know where your hot spots are on your smoker. If you need to rotate them, it is definitely harder than putting the big logs of summer sausage on. But you can go on Amazon, and for like $10, you can buy a very small, it's like a 10 millimeter stuffing tube, and it's made specifically for these, standard kind of snack stick size deals. And you can slide an entire row of the 17 millimeter collagen casings over top of the thing. And you can rip out, as long as the casing is, you can do it all in one rip out of the stuffer.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, a lot of those do not have the small enough tube for that. And if you don't have the small enough tube for that, and you're trying to stuff casing that does not fit correctly over the tube, you will never do snack sticks again.
I mean, you're hitting. Now, let me ask you this: when you smoke it, do you smoke it as one continuous stick, or do you cut them into the links and then set them in your smoker?
I've done it both ways. I've got. I know we're gonna talk about this maybe, but I've got a big Traeger, and I also have a vertical smoker as well. So I've done the kind of the snake style, where you just fold it back and forth all the way through, and I've cut them to like whatever 26 inches or whatever will fit perfectly across the smoker. I like cutting them ahead of time so that they fit evenly across there, because it's easier to rotate them. If you start getting a hot spot on one, it's a lot easier to grab one section and slide and move around if you need to, than to have a 10-foot coil of snack sticks that you're trying to not have the one end burn. So yeah, I typically cut them and just lay as many of them out and across as I can. I'm trying to conjure up a way to build like a second rack in there. So that's I've been brainstorming that, so I can get a second rack of them up there. So yeah, well,
that's a good way to transcend into the smoking aspect. So all the summer sausage I do, I smoke. I actually built a little smokehouse. It's pretty rudimentary. It's made of pine tongue and groove siding. It is 3 foot by 3 foot by 5 foot tall. It's got a door on it, a little chimney stack, and then just a couple vents that literally I have a piece of that pine siding on that I can open or close to help with airflow and temperature. And then in the bottom of it, I've got a steel drum that I've cut down, and I smoke with usually oak or hickory, and I have small pieces that I've split, and they're probably, I'd say 10 inches long to 12 inches long, and they're, maybe about 2 inches around-ish, when I split them. And I'll just catch those on fire and get them smoldering, and it's a very it takes longer, I'm sure, than like on a Traeger where you have much more consistent temperature. But I'll try to smoke somewhere around 200 to 240 degrees. That's a big variance, but again, I don't have an element. And
Right.
I hang my casings up vertically at the top, or my sausage links, if you will, my logs. And I'll usually smoke them until about 156 to 58. And the biggest trick that I can share when I've done this is that I always try to make sure I have a lot of snow on the ground, or if there's just not snow, I have a cooler full of ice and a little bit of water. And the reason is once my logs hit that temperature, I immediately want to stop the cooking. I feel like I've had issues before where when that sausage kind of dries out and it starts to get too firm and it gets tough, I think it's because it continues to cook. For the same reason why you want to pull your steaks on a grill a little bit earlier and let them rest and settle. I've noticed, like I said, once I pull them at that 156 to 58 mark, I'm immediately throw them in a clean snowbank or in that cooler to kind of shock them, if you will, and stop the cooking process. But that's how I do it.
Yep, that's exactly the same. We always hope for snow on the ground. If not, we've got a big ice bath to throw them in. And I did not do that when I first started, and picked that trick up as well. And it really eliminates it keeps your summer sausage firm, and from kind of withering or crinkling up.
Yeah.
People will, especially when people first start, you see this a lot on the deer processing forums and Facebook groups and whatnot, but people are like, why the heck does my summer sausage look like this? Well, almost all the time it's because you didn't immediately stop that cooking and get it cooled off as fast as you could.
100%. So, all right. Now, anything else you want to talk about with equipment that we use, or tricks or tips into processing before we get into a couple recipes to share?
I'm good, man. I can't, like I said, this is kind of a selfish idea on my end because I've always admired your guys' setup. So I've got a couple items here I've jotted down that I need to do to my shop, and it's been great, man.
All right. Well, I'm going to share with you 3 recipes. One's you're going to be like, really, you're sharing this? It's super simple, but my hands down favorite recipe, and if anybody wants me to actually physically send it to them, this isn't a family heirloom secret. It's something I just developed. I got a passion for cooking from my mother. I cook and I bake. I know it's kind of like the exact opposite of what a big old burly hunter should do, but it's Italian venison, same thing as Italian beef. And this recipe is so ridiculously easy and so amazing. I've never had anybody eat it, hunter or non-hunter, that hasn't liked it. So I'll list it off really quick. You take like a 3 to 4 pound venison roast, kind of like that football roast we were talking about, or a hind quarter roast. It's 2 jars of mild giardiniera. You can find this at any grocery store. It's usually like in the section with pickles and peppers. 1 jar of chopped pepperoncini peppers. 1 small, cheap, generic bottle of Italian seasoning, and 1 light beer. You literally take that, throw it all in a crock pot. You cook it for like 8 to 12 hours, shred it, mix it all together, and dude, you're going to have the most dynamite Italian venison sandwich you could ever imagine. And it's just so easy, man. It's stupid. My wife and I make this all the time if we have people coming over, or we're doing like a little shed bash, and it just gets devoured. And it's so easy. Literally, you throw the stuff in the crock pot and you walk away.
Yep. I'm gonna cut you off before your second one.
Yeah.
This is one of mine. It's slightly different though. We call it Mississippi pot roast.
Oh, nice.
So it is very, very similar. Aside from, so same thing. This is where we typically will use the neck roast, right? So we'll put the whole neck roast in the crock pot. Again, two jars of, we use just pepperoncini peppers, and then you actually use an au jus packet, like seasoning mix, and then a seasoning mix of just ranch, like powdered ranch, like seasoning. Put that in there, a couple sticks of butter, and it's the same thing, except we don't make sandwiches out of it. We'll serve it with like mashed potatoes and stuffing. So you get this kind of sloppy,
hearty.
Yeah. So it's very similar. I've grown up knowing it as Mississippi pot roast, but it is essentially Italian beef with a couple different spices thrown in there.
Well, and I think full disclosure, right? If anybody wants this, get a hold of Evan. You can hit him up on his Instagram, and you're willing to share these recipes, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All these, yeah.
So I'll do another one. You do another one. So my next one is tacos. Sounds silly, but I do a couple tricks that like I think take our deer tacos up to the next level. And to be honest, Evan, I couldn't even tell you the last time we made beef tacos at our house. Like if we have tacos, it's with deer.
We're the same way.
And
my wife and I.
Literally, again, we've had non-hunters and hunters combined, and they can't ever tell the difference. The deer is so much leaner. There's almost no grease to drain on it. But anyway, we'll take 2 pounds of lean ground deer. We'll brown it, and then we'll use whatever taco seasoning packet you want. A couple things that we do differently to our base is that I'll usually add a small can of refried beans to it. Now, I'm not a beans guy. I'm not. But you'll find that it'll make your taco mixture a little bit creamier. And then I'll also, I'll do 1 packet of seasoning and 1 packet of red enchilada sauce. So again, you find it right next to the packet that you can buy your taco seasoning. And you add water, and I don't remember exactly what's all different. But when you do those 2 little things to the tacos, I think you'll find that the consistency, not that I eat a lot at Taco Bell, it's kind of like more of that consistency. And it's that burrito kind of flavoring with that enchilada red sauce packet. And so that little trick that I do is like, people say, "Hey, I need your taco recipe." I'm like, dude, it's not lavish. It's so like it's so easy. But that's my second one to give away.
Awesome. So we're just gonna keep following each other here because my next one is also tacos, but this is where my whole shoulders come in.
Yes.
So this is actually, I can't take total credit for this. I've tweaked it and made it my own a little bit, but I don't know if you follow the UFC or if you know who Chad Mendez is.
Oh yeah,
he's the Fin Feather Deal Outfitters or whatever. He has a YouTube video from I think 2014, and it's just you guys can type this in and find it. This recipe is not written anywhere online. It's just this one YouTube video, and every time I make these, I have people reach out to me and ask for it, and I have to send them this YouTube video link. But it's called Chad Mendez Cooks Whole Venison Shoulder. So basically, this is why I leave. Ever since I found this recipe, I have not deboned a front shoulder. So this you basically take the entire front shoulder. You season it with whatever, I typically use like a taco seasoning and then some sort of a dry rub that you'd put on maybe a brisket or something else that you're smoking. I put it on the smoker for about 5 hours. No real temperature you're trying to get it to. It's just trying to get that kind of crust on the outside of the venison shoulder. Mm-hmm. From there, this does take a long time, but from there you bring it inside. You get a big kind of boat, a foil boat, or not a boat, what do they call it? Like the pan, like a baking pan.
Yeah. Yep.
Set the whole shoulder down in the pan. You use a pint, 16 ounces of beer, whatever your liking is. I typically use like a red ale type deal, like a Mexican style beer, just because we're making tacos. Pour that can over top. You'll put, typically when I'm doing a bigger shoulder like this, it'll be 2 whole onions and 3 peppers kind of cut up into big chunks. And then depending on the crowd, I like heat. So I'll add some jalapenos. If the crowd does not like heat, I will not add the fresh jalapenos at this point. And then you can buy, similar to where you buy your enchilada mix, they're called chipotle peppers in adobo sauce.
Oh yeah, dude, those are dynamite.
You put a couple cans of that in there.
Well, those are kind of hot too, man.
Yes, they can be. Yep. So then you cover that whole boat with the beer and all the peppers and onions and all that stuff. Cover it with foil, put it back on the smoker for about another 5 to 6 hours. And when you pull that off the smoker, it will shred apart, and you won't even know that there was any silver skin in the shoulder. You won't. It all just melts away, and it shreds into this perfect, like a pulled pork kind of consistency. And all the juices and the beer and the chipotle peppers and all that stuff is mixed in. And I like it, maybe not for a non-hunting group, but the aesthetics of serving it with the shoulder blade and the paddle in there is kind of a really cool way to serve tacos. And then you'll have, basically just have some cilantro, some jalapenos, some onions, and some tortillas, and people kind of just pick and make street tacos out of it. So,
dude, I'm so trying that.
Yeah, this is I leave all of my shoulders whole because of this recipe that Chad put out on YouTube. And you can also follow the same kind of process, but use barbecue sauce instead of like a taco style seasoning. So
sure.
Instead of adding all the taco ingredients, you might add some caramelized onions, some mushrooms, stuff like that, and make more of like a pulled barbecue shoulder. But all of my shoulders stay whole. I smoke them all, and I make this kind of pulled recipe out of all of my shoulders.
So you're saying I can't shoulder shoot my late season does anymore? Like, God, and it's so easy. Again, it's a lot of time in the smoker. But dude, okay, I'm totally trying that. I'm not blowing smoke. I'm going to try that for sure. The last one I have, it's a long recipe, so I'm not going to whistle it off, but I make a badass chili. I'm kind of partial to it. It's something that I've come up with for a long time, but one thing we didn't talk about is cubing venison. So my wife and I like to make a lot of hearty stews and chilies and like goulash and other things. So sometimes what we'll do with some of those roasts that we don't want to grind, if we have a surplus of ground, is we'll go ahead and cube it before we package it. And this is where it comes into play. But I'll just kind of give a synopsis of my chili. If anybody wants a recipe, it's not a secret. I'm happy to give it out. But, it's got venison, bacon, onions, and peppers in it. And then I use some pretty different seasonings in it. A couple of them, like I use those chipotle chilies with adobo sauce. That's one of my staples in it. I use red wine. I also use molasses. And then one of the other ones that's kind of really weird is I actually put some pumpkin into my chili. And the chili flavor that comes out with this, with my seasoning mixture and the bacon and the venison and everything, it's a very hearty and earthy flavored chili. It's not spicy. It doesn't have a lot of beans in it, and it's very thick as well. It's not a chili that's going to have, it's not like a soup or a brothy chili. So I know, like, I'm looking at my recipe here because I have it saved. I don't have it memorized by any means, but I bet you there's 10 different seasonings on here. But that's one of my staples, especially in the fall. Like, we always have to have a great big pot. Like, I'll literally make like 1.5 gallons of this chili at least once a year.
Sounds awesome. I was gonna ask you. You answered. I was gonna ask you if beans belong in chili, and I got my answer.
What do you think?
Absolutely. I don't know why it's an argument. They absolutely. You got to have beans in chili.
I agree. Like, I do not very much. Like I said, a can of pinto and a can of black beans. I don't know why they wouldn't. I've always had them live in there. Something else that I add to my chili, which is kind of maybe a little bit off the wall. We package our own sweet corn. So we have a deal with a farmer. It's fantastic. And we'll literally, dude, we'll get like 15 dozen and we'll boil it and pull all the kernels off. But I put sweet corn in my chili, and it's not a lot. It's about a cup, a little bit more, but there's a little crunch then in the chili, and it just adds a little crispness to it that I think it just adds an element. But anywho.
Very nice.
You got any other ones you want to share before we get into the Would You Rather?
No, I think we're good. I do have one. I guess I'll rip one more up. I'm very partial to just a plain old backstrap, kind of reverse seared. That's reverse seared, salt and pepper. I love the taste of venison. All that. So that's my 90% is how I'm going to do a backstrap, either medallions or in the bigger strips. But I did want a little different. the other day, and it turned out awesome. They call it the spicy garlic backstrap. So again, you don't like spice, so this probably won't.
Ay, Dios mío.
This will not tickle your fancy here, but I marinated the backstrap overnight in
Ghost
B-Dubs
pepper extract?
No, B-Dubs Parmesan garlic wing sauce. And then the next day I seasoned it with a spicy seasoning on the grill. It's called Slap Your Mama seasoning. Don't do that, but it's the name of the seasoning. And then I also made like a fresh, like I roasted some garlic and made like a garlic spread to serve with that. So that turned out really good. Just experimenting. Like I'm like you, I have a passion for cooking, and I'm always trying to come up with new stuff. So don't be afraid to experiment.
All right. Sound into the Would You Rather segment, sir. These are kind of, you can go into detail or just rattle one answer or the other, but would you rather eat a possum or a coyote?
Coyote.
Yeah, I think I'd agree too. Like, at least coyotes eat mostly living stuff,
Yeah.
Here's another gross one for you. Would you rather fry carp nuggets or dogfish nuggets?
Carp? You said carp or dogfish?
Yeah.
Ooh. Probably carp.
Yeah, I've eaten carp. Growing up, my dad would score it and we'd smoke it.
Yep.
But I've never had a dogfish. I'm like, okay, they usually eat like other fish. I don't know. I'd probably go with the safe bet too. Other than the fact that they got a ton of Y bones in them.
Yeah. Do you know what a drum is?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So I just had this the first time last year, but there's they call it Kentucky shrimp. So my wife's got a great aunt that's from Kentucky. She made this for us, and it was actually delicious. But there's like a little strip, like almost like a backstrap on a drum, and you pull that out and you cube it up and you throw it in the fish fry, and it's got a very similar consistency and taste to shrimp. So that is a wild one for you guys to try, Kentucky shrimp.
All right. Now, would you rather, this is getting into deer now, would you rather shoot a 170-inch buck? I'm not going to tell you anything else, but he shed one side. Or, so you have a 170, like he's a 170 deer, but one antler's gone. Or a 140-inch buck with both antlers.
140-inch buck with both antlers.
Okay.
I think the 170 gets he gets the pass for the year.
Sure.
Unless you can find the antler or you see him shedding. Yeah. I'd have to. I would never stop walking to find that other side if it happened. Would you rather shoot a Coues deer or a blacktail deer? Blacktail.
And last one here. In 2023, would you rather get a brand new bow or a brand new rifle?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I just got a rifle this year. I have been rocking my same Triax since 2018, and I love that bow.
It's
so
a great
I'd probably
bow.
take the new bow.
Nice. What would you get?
I'm a Matthews guy, so whatever's either new and improved, or we'll see how this phase 4 they came out with holds up. But yeah, I like all the new integration stuff they're doing. I just haven't seen a reason to upgrade. I love my little Triax. It's got a lot of tallies on it. So.
Oh, and dude, it's still to this day one of the quietest bows they ever made. I loved my Triax. It was awesome. Yep. So you're not doing anything wrong. But anyhow, any last comments, Evan?
No, not. I seriously, I appreciate you having me on. It's like I said, I've been following you guys for a long time, and when I started my page a couple of years back, I still remember you sending me a message. I had like 150 followers, and you sent me a message just of encouragement, and this has been awesome, man. I really starting the page and just meeting people and the doors it's opened. It's been really great, man. So I appreciate you having me on, and. If anybody has any questions or wants some recipes, don't hesitate to reach out.
No. Well, so again, EVR Outdoors, check them out on Instagram. Evan, you better go thank your grandma for making you make this page. But I appreciate you taking the time. And if you ever need anything, did you know how to get a hold of me? All right.
Sounds good, man. Seriously, I appreciate it.
Take care, buddy.
Take care, guys.
Man, what an awesome dude. I'm so glad that I got to talk to him. And it sounds like he's just about as deep into deer processing as I am. There's not much really to wrap up here. ATA is next week, so I'm pretty darn sure I'm going to be going there. If you have any products that you want me to check out, make sure you shoot me a message. It's always a fun time. I'm excited to see the films in the Badlands Film Festival. Sounds like they didn't get as many entries this year. We did not submit a film this year into it as well. It's an arduous task, and I'm going to be honest, man. Some of the people that submit films in there just have some pretty impressive budgets to be able to work with. And don't get me wrong, we're good at killing whitetails, but if you look at the films that have won in the past, it's not a whitetail, it's an elk, it's a bear, it's a moose, and so just going to be excited to go there and check it out. And coming down the pipe, I've got some really cool coyote hunting podcasts that we're going to have on, getting some guests on that absolutely stack up the dogs. So if you are a predator hunter, either daytime or nighttime, we're going to cover that, and then we're going to get into some shed season. So thank you for listening. As always, don't waste it.